The scent of high-octane fuel and scorched rubber was a familiar perfume in my world. It clung to my clothes, permeated my skin, and settled deep in my lungs. My name is Sandra, and at 24, I'd spent more time under the hood of a roaring engine than in front of a mirror. My hands, calloused and perpetually stained with grease, were my most reliable tools. I'd just landed the lead mechanic position for Velocity Racing, a top-tier team, and frankly, I was more comfortable with the raw, honest mechanics of AV8 than the intricate, often messy, dynamics of people. The pit garage, a cavernous space usually buzzing with frantic energy, felt particularly charged that Tuesday morning. My new team lead, a stocky man named Frank, clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was more a tremor than an embrace. "Sandra, meet Cynthia Hayes, our star driver." And there she was, Cynthia Hayes. Even without the roar of an engine or the blur of a racetrack, she commanded attention. Her hair, a cascade of fiery red, seemed to catch the fluorescent lights, framing a face that was all sharp angles and captivating curves. Her eyes, the color of warm amber, held a glint of restless energy, even when she was still. She was wearing form-fitting team gear, which accentuated her lean, athletic build. There was an undeniable magnetism about her, an aura of expensive confidence that felt as foreign to me as a black-tie gala. She offered a quick, almost dismissive nod, her gaze sweeping over my oil-stained jumpsuit and practical ponytail before settling back on Frank. "She's good with a new turbo package?" Her voice was crisp, with an underlying impatience, like a finely tuned engine revving too high. Frank, ever the diplomat, cleared his throat. "Sandra's got a stellar reputation, Cynthia. Best in her class for engine diagnostics, especially with forced induction systems." I kept my expression neutral, but internally, a familiar cynicism flickered. Star driver usually meant entitled prima donna in my experience. I knew my worth. I didn't need a cheerleader, especially not one whose eyes were already sizing me up with thinly veiled doubt. "Right." Cynthia's response was clipped. She turned those amber eyes on me, a direct, unblinking stare that felt less like an introduction and more like an interrogation. "Frank says you want to tweak the wastegate response and adjust the fuel-air mixture. We've had it set a certain way for the last 3 races." I met her gaze, refusing to flinch. The telemetry from the last test run suggests a slight lean condition under peak boost, especially exiting the hairpin on turn 3. A minor adjustment to the mixture and a quicker wastegate actuation would give you an additional 8 to 10 horsepower without compromising reliability. It would also reduce turbo lag by about 0.07 seconds, which, on this track, could translate to a significant advantage. My voice was calm, factual, devoid of any emotional inflection. I spoke the language of precision. Cynthia's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched fractionally. Her lips, a natural rose hue, pressed into a thin line. 8 to 10 horsepower? For 0.07 seconds? My current setup has won us 2 races. I don't like making last-minute changes, especially not based on theories. The word theories hung in the air, laden with disdain. It was a thinly veiled dismissal of my expertise. A muscle in my jaw tightened imperceptibly. "It's not a theory, Ms. Hayes. It's data analysis and practical application. The engine is running hot at high RPMs, risking premature wear and potential failure. My suggestion optimizes performance and longevity." She let out a soft, almost imperceptible scoff. Her gaze held mine for another beat, a silent challenge, before she finally turned away, a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Just make sure the car is ready for qualifying tomorrow. No surprises." With that, she walked off, her confident stride echoing through the pit, leaving a faint trail of expensive perfume in her wake. Frank offered me an apologetic shrug. "She's particular. Don't take it personally, Sandra." I didn't. Not really. I took it as a confirmation of my initial assessment. Star driver, indeed. But as I watched her walk away, I noticed something subtle. A fleeting clench of her jaw, a slight tension in her shoulders that belied her outward confidence. It was a flash of something beneath the polished surface, a flicker of anxiety masked by bravado. An unexpected observation, considering my focus was usually on the roar of an engine, not the hidden currents in a woman's eyes. I tucked it away, a tiny anomaly in an otherwise predictable equation. The sun beat down relentlessly on the track the following day, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage. The roar of the engines was a visceral drumbeat in my chest, a rhythm I understood intimately. Qualifying was underway, and Cynthia, despite her initial dismissiveness, had allowed me to make the adjustments. Not because she trusted me, I suspected, but because Frank had likely pressured her. The wastegate response was crisper, the engine breathing more efficiently, just as I had predicted. I watched her car, number 7, flash past, a blur of crimson and white. She was fast, undeniably talented, carving through corners with an aggressive precision that was captivating to witness. My eyes, however, weren't just on her speed. They were on the telemetry readings streaming onto my tablet, on the subtle nuances of engine temperature and tire pressure. My concern, the slight lean condition I'd observed, was still there, though mitigated. I'd specifically advised her to manage her entry speed into turn 3, a particularly tight hairpin, to avoid overstressing the engine and tires if she planned to push it hard on the exit. She took the turn, and then she pushed. Harder than I recommended. The data spiked. A fraction of a second too late on the lift, a microsecond too early on the throttle. It was a minuscule error, barely perceptible to the casual observer, but in the brutal calculus of professional racing, it was everything. The car twitched, a controlled slide that cost her precious momentum. She recovered, of course, with a skill that made her a star, but the damage was done. When the session ended, her qualifying time placed her P3. Not terrible, but not P1, which was what she always aimed for. The pit lane was a different beast after qualifying. The celebratory chatter of other teams filtered through the air, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that descended upon our garage. Cynthia's usual post-session debrief, filled with animated gestures and confident pronouncements, was replaced by a grim, tense quiet. She walked straight past the eager reporters, her face a mask of frustration, her vibrant red hair a stark contrast to the pale set of her jaw. She peeled off her helmet, the rush of air a sound of defeat. Her eyes, usually so bright, were clouded with a potent mix of disappointment and self-reproach. She avoided my gaze, focusing instead on the floor, on her shoes, on anything but me. It was clear she knew. She'd felt the car slip, knew exactly where she'd pushed too hard. I approached her, a clipboard clutched in my hand. My voice was calm, devoid of any "I told you so" triumph. The lean condition was still a factor at turn 3, Ms. Hayes. You pushed it a little too hard on the exit. The front tires also spiked slightly on temperature. That microsecond of slide cost you your pole position. She flinched, as if my words were physical blows. Her shoulders slumped, a rare display of vulnerability from the usually impervious star driver. Finally, slowly, her eyes lifted to meet mine. They were raw, wounded, and held an unexpected vulnerability. The fiery confidence was gone, replaced by something much softer, much more human. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse with frustration. She paused, running a hand through her disheveled hair, avoiding my direct gaze once more. You were right. The words seemed to be torn from her, difficult, almost painful. About turn 3. I felt it. The car didn't quite have the grip. I should have listened. The admission hung in the air, heavy and significant. It wasn't just an apology, it was a surrender, a concession of control. A hairline crack had appeared in the formidable facade of Cynthia Hayes. I simply nodded, acknowledging her words without gloating. There was no need. The data, and her own experience, had spoken for themselves. We can adjust it further for the race, I said, my voice still level, professional. We'll pull the data from this session, fine-tune the fuel map and tire pressure. You'll have better stability and power through that corner. She looked at me then, truly looked at me, not with dismissiveness or challenge, but with a flicker of something akin to gratitude, and perhaps a hesitant respect. The corner of her mouth, so often set in a determined line, softened almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, Sandra." It was a small moment, just a few words exchanged in a loud, bustling garage. But it felt like a significant shift, a quiet forging of a tentative truce. The tension that had coiled between us had, for the moment, dissipated, replaced by a fragile understanding. I found myself, despite my usual emotional detachment, feeling a peculiar sense of calm settle over me. The star driver, for all her bravado, was human after all. And in that shared vulnerability, a new path, however faint, had begun to form. The days leading up to the next race felt different. The air in the garage, once thick with unspoken tension between Cynthia and me, had thinned, replaced by a more collaborative hum. After her P3 finish, Cynthia had become a silent observer. She still carried herself with that undeniable star power, but now, when I explained the intricacies of a suspension tweak or a gear ratio adjustment, she listened. Really listened. Her amber eyes, once quick to dismiss, now followed my movements with an almost studious intensity. I, in turn, found myself dedicating extra hours to her car. Each bolt tightened, each wire checked, was done with a renewed focus. I'd walk her through the telemetry data from her last race, pointing out the subtle shifts in engine temperature, the minute variations in tire degradation. "See here," I'd murmur, my finger tracing a jagged line on the tablet screen. The rear left was losing traction just before the chicane. "We'll adjust the camber by a 1/4 degree, give you more bite." She would nod, her gaze fixed on the screen, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. Sometimes, she'd ask a pointed question, surprising me with her quick grasp of the technical details. "Would that compromise the straight-line stability?" she'd inquire, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. One evening, deep into the night, the garage was quiet save for the rhythmic clink of my wrench and the distant hum of the ventilation system. Cynthia was still there, perched on a workbench, nursing a lukewarm coffee. We had been going over potential strategies for a particularly challenging track. I was hunched over the engine bay, my headlamp casting a focused beam on the intricate array of pipes and wires. "You know," she said, breaking the silence, her voice a low murmur, "most mechanics just tell me what they've done. You explain the why." I grunted, tightening a hose clamp. "Understanding the why means you can anticipate how the car will react. Gives you more control." She chuckled, a soft, unexpected sound that made something in my chest flutter. Control. That's always been my Achilles heel, apparently. I pulled back from the engine, wiping my greasy hands on a rag. I glanced at her, a hint of a smile playing on my lips. "For a control freak, you sure like to push the limits." She laughed again, a little louder this time, a genuine, uninhibited sound. "Guilty as charged." She hopped off the workbench, stretching languidly. The movement was fluid, graceful. "Long day, huh?" "They're all long days when you're chasing milliseconds," I replied, my voice dry. She walked over to me, peering into the engine bay. Her arm brushed against mine, a fleeting contact that sent a peculiar jolt through me. It was accidental, I told myself, just the confined space. But my skin tingled where her arm had touched, and I found my breath catching in my throat for a fraction of a second. The scent of her perfume, light and citrusy, mingled with the familiar smell of oil and metal, creating an intoxicating new blend. "You really know your stuff, Sandra," she said, her voice softer now, her eyes meeting mine. There was a warmth in them I hadn't seen before, a genuine admiration. "I haven't worked with anyone quite like you." The compliment, simple as it was, disarmed me. I felt a blush creep up my neck, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. I cleared my throat, suddenly uncomfortable. "Just doing my job." She leaned in slightly, a mischievous glint in her amber eyes. "Oh, I think it's more than just a job for you. I think you love it." Her face was close enough for me to see the tiny flecks of gold in her irises, the subtle curve of her upper lip. The air thickened between us, charged with an unspoken current. It was just a casual conversation, a shared moment of professional respect, but something beneath the surface was shifting, sparking. My heart, usually a steady, reliable rhythm, had begun to beat a little faster, a little harder. The mechanic in me tried to rationalize it, adrenaline, late-night fatigue. But the woman in me, the one I rarely acknowledged, simply felt a strange, undeniable pull. She pulled back then, a soft smile on her face. "Well, I'm heading out. Don't work too hard." Milliseconds. She gave me a playful tap on the shoulder, a light, lingering touch that warmed my skin long after she'd walked away. As the door swung shut behind her, leaving me alone in the quiet garage, I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the persistent thrum of my heart. The lingering scent of her perfume, still clinging to the air, felt like a soft caress. I found myself replaying the moment, the sound of her laugh, the warmth in her eyes, the unexpected brush of her arm. The why of it all was suddenly far more complex than any engine diagram I'd ever deciphered. And for the first time in a long time, my pragmatic, logical mind had no immediate answer. The days blurred into a flurry of pit stops, practice runs, and race weekends. With each passing event, the synergy between Cynthia and me grew, palpable to everyone on the team. My meticulous adjustments and her refined driving became a formidable combination. We weren't just winning. We were dominating. The crimson number 7 car, once a symbol of her individual prowess, now felt like a testament to our combined efforts. The garage, once a place of strictly professional interactions, had transformed. It became a space where our shared jokes echoed louder than the whirring tools. Cynthia, with her vibrant energy, had a knack for teasing, a playful challenge to my usually stoic demeanor. "Still covered in more grease than car parts, Sandra?" she'd quip, leaning against a tire rack, her amber eyes sparkling with amusement. I'd shoot her a dry look, wiping a smudge from my cheek with the back of my hand. "Someone has to get their hands dirty, Ms. Hayes. Unlike some people, my job isn't just to look pretty behind the wheel." She'd throw her head back and laugh, a rich, melodic sound that resonated through the concrete space.
Ouch.
"Shots fired, mechanic. But I think you clean up nicely." Her gaze would linger for a fraction longer than necessary, a warmth in her eyes that sent a faint blush creeping up my neck. These playful exchanges became our rhythm, a subtle dance of give and take that chipped away at my guarded exterior. I found myself anticipating her playful jabs and, surprisingly, enjoying them. There was a lightness to our interactions, an unspoken understanding that transcended mere professionalism. The physical proximity, once accidental, began to feel less so. After a particularly demanding practice session, as I leaned into the cockpit to explain a minor adjustment, Cynthia's hand would come up, not to point at a dial, but to gently rest on my arm, her fingers brushing my skin. It was fleeting, innocent, yet each touch left a lingering warmth, a faint current of electricity that pulsed beneath my skin. When she'd return to the pit after a stellar lap, I'd instinctively place a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of congratulations, and her body would subtly lean into my touch for a second before she moved on. My logical mind tried to dismiss these sensations, these rising heartbeats, as a natural byproduct of intense collaboration, the adrenaline of racing. But deeper down, a quieter voice stirred. It wasn't just professional camaraderie. It was something else, something uncharted. I found myself observing her, not just her driving technique or her car's performance, but her. The way her red hair would catch the light when she laughed, the focused intensity in her eyes when she reviewed data, the almost imperceptible frown that creased her brow when she was deep in thought. Cynthia, too, seemed to be observing me. She started asking questions about my life outside the garage, what I did for fun, what kind of music I listened to. Questions that went beyond the professional, infused with a new, gentle curiosity. I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, a thoughtful expression on her face, as if she were trying to decipher a complex puzzle. One evening, after another win, the team gathered for a celebratory dinner. The air was festive, but my focus kept drifting to Cynthia across the table. Her face, flushed with success and a few glasses of champagne, was radiant. Her laughter was infectious, her presence magnetic. As she recounted a particularly daring maneuver on the track, her hand reached across the table, not for a glass, but for my arm, her fingers gently squeezing in shared excitement. The touch, brief as it was, sent a jolt through me, hotter than any engine. Later, as the evening wound down, we stood by the car, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the warmth of the restaurant. Everyone else had left. Cynthia was leaning against the fender, her gaze fixed on the stars, a pensive look on her face. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "when you first joined, I thought you were just another stiff mechanic, all facts and figures." She turned to me, her amber eyes reflecting the distant lights. "I was wrong. You're something else, Sandra." My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat. The air around us felt thick with unspoken words, with a tension that was both exquisite and terrifying. Her compliment, the way she looked at me, it was intoxicating. I felt a yearning unfurl within me, a silent, powerful desire that shocked me with its intensity. I simply stood there, incapable of words, my gaze locked with hers, silently acknowledging the undeniable current that now flowed between us. The why no longer mattered, only the what now. The night before the championship race, the air crackled with a different kind of electricity. Not just the usual pre-race nerves, but something else, something deeply personal, hummed between Cynthia and me. The weight of the season, the culmination of all our efforts, pressed down on us. For Cynthia, the pressure was immense. The expectations of her team, her sponsors, and her own fierce ambition. But I sensed a new layer of anxiety in her, one that seemed tied to my presence, to the unspoken bond that had formed between us. As the garage emptied, the silence grew, amplifying the subtle sounds of my tools as I performed the final, meticulous checks on the number 7 car. Cynthia lingered, as she often did now, but tonight felt different. Her usual confident swagger was tempered by a visible restlessness. She paced, ran a hand through her vibrant hair, then stopped, her gaze fixed on the gleaming bodywork of her car. "Can we talk for a minute?" she asked, her voice softer than usual, a vulnerability I hadn't often heard. I straightened up from the engine bay, wiping my hands on a rag, my heart already bracing for whatever was coming. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, casting long shadows. "Everything okay?" She walked closer, stopping just a few feet from me. Her amber eyes, usually so bold, now held a deep, uncharacteristic apprehension. I can't shake this feeling." She gestured vaguely. "About tomorrow. About everything." She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling visibly. "I'm terrified, Sandra. Terrified of messing it up. Of letting everyone down. Of not being enough." The raw honesty of her confession surprised me. Cynthia Hayes, the confident star, admitting fear, admitting vulnerability. It was a side of her she rarely, if ever, showed. My usual pragmatic response felt inadequate. Instead, I simply listened, my gaze unwavering, offering a silent, anchoring presence. "Everyone expects me to win," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "My whole career has been built on this. And sometimes I just feel like it's all going to crumble. Like I'm a fraud just waiting to be exposed." She looked at me then, her eyes pleading for understanding. "Does that make sense? Or am I just completely crazy?" I stepped closer, instinctively. The distance between us, which had felt so vast, suddenly felt insignificant. "It makes perfect sense," I said, my voice low and steady. "It takes courage to admit that, Cynthia. Real courage. And you're not a fraud. You've earned every win, every championship. I've seen the data. I've seen you drive. You're exceptional." My words hung in the quiet air, a balm to her exposed nerves. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, as if trying to find a hidden truth. The racing world, with its noise and spectacle, faded away. It was just us, in that quiet garage, bathed in the soft glow of the work lights. She took another step, closing the remaining distance between us. Her hand, hesitant at first, reached out and gently rested on my arm, her fingers curling around my bicep. The touch was light, yet it sent a tremor through me, a shiver that had nothing to do with the cool night air. Her thumb began to trace slow, circular patterns on my skin, an absent-minded gesture that felt anything but. "You really believe that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I do," I confirmed, my gaze locked with hers. The intensity in her eyes was breathtaking. The subtle scent of her perfume, mixed with the faint metallic tang of the garage, filled my senses. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, exhilarating rhythm. This was it. This was the precipice. Her eyes, wide and searching, dropped to my lips. She leaned in, slowly, an unspoken question in the slight parting of her own. My breath hitched. I met her halfway, my own lips parting in silent invitation. The first contact was soft, tentative, a gentle brush of skin against skin. It was exploratory, uncertain, yet imbued with a profound weight of all the unspoken moments that had led us to this point. Then, with a sudden, undeniable surge, the kiss deepened. Her hand tightened on my arm, and mine, almost without conscious thought, found its way to her waist, pulling her closer, pressing our bodies together. It was a rush of sensation. The softness of her lips, the warmth of her breath, the intoxicating taste of her. A wave of exhilaration and something akin to disbelief washed over me. This was Cynthia Hayes, the star, the one who had scoffed at my theories. And now, here she was, her body pressed against mine, her lips moving against mine with a surprising, fierce hunger. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, the silence was deafening. Her eyes, wide and startled, met mine. A flush had risen on her cheeks, and her chest heaved with quick, shallow breaths. Shock, exhilaration, and a dizzying disorientation swirled in her amber depths. My own mind, usually so precise, was a kaleidoscope of emotions, a potent mix of astonishment, desire, and a bewildering sense of belonging. The world, which had always felt so solid, had just irrevocably shifted on its axis. We stood there, two women in a quiet garage, forever altered by a single, audacious kiss. The morning after was a study in awkward silences and averted gazes. The championship race loomed, a massive, roaring beast, but for Cynthia and me, a different kind of tension hung in the air. The memory of the kiss, still vivid and potent, was a silent third party in every interaction. We moved around each other like strangers, our usual easy banter replaced by clipped, professional directives. My instructions were succinct, her responses terse. Every shared glance, however fleeting, was charged with a mixture of confusion, lingering desire, and a palpable sense of apprehension. Cynthia, usually a whirlwind of focused energy on race day, was subdued. Her vibrant red hair, often a testament to her dynamism, seemed to lie a little flatter. Her usual pre-race ritual of pumping herself up with music and intense focus was replaced by a thoughtful, almost distant quietude. I caught her watching me from across the garage, her brow furrowed, a profound introspection in her amber eyes that suggested a battle was raging within her. For my part, I tried to compartmentalize. I focused on the engine, the tire pressures, the optimal fuel strategy. My pragmatic mind sought refuge in the tangible, the predictable. But beneath the surface, a persistent current flowed. The warmth of her lips, the surprising intensity of her embrace, they were imprinted on my senses. My usual cynicism, my emotional detachment, felt flimsy, inadequate against the undeniable longing that had taken root within me. I wanted to replay every moment, analyze every touch, but my logical mind was overwhelmed by the sheer, exhilarating chaos of it all. After the first practice session, the car returned to the pit. I approached it, clipboard in hand, ready for my usual debrief. Cynthia was already out, peeling off her helmet, her face devoid of its usual post-drive analysis. She moved to the side, ostensibly to speak with Frank, but her eyes kept darting towards me, then quickly away. The air was thick, suffocating. I couldn't bear the silence, the pretense, any longer. I finished my quick assessment of the car and then, deliberately, walked towards her, stopping a respectful but firm distance away. Frank had just walked off, leaving us alone, suspended in the hum of the garage. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low, calm, but firm. I didn't demand answers, didn't accuse. I simply stated a fact. Cynthia flinched, her shoulders tensing. She still wouldn't meet my gaze directly. "About what, Sandra?" "The car's running fine. We have a race to win." Her voice was defensive, brittle. "About last night," I clarified, my voice unwavering. "About what happened." She finally looked at me, her eyes clouded with a mix of fear and defiance. "Last night was a mistake. A moment of weakness. The pressure, you know? It gets to you." She stammered, clearly grasping for an explanation, for an escape hatch. It didn't mean anything. The word stung, a sharp, cold jab to my burgeoning hope. But I simply looked at her, my expression unreadable. I knew it wasn't true. I'd felt the intensity of her kiss, the way her body had pressed against mine. "If it didn't mean anything, Cynthia, then why are you so unsettled?" I asked, my voice a quiet challenge. "Why are you avoiding me? Why are you trying to convince yourself it was a mistake?" Her facade cracked. Her jaw tightened, and her eyes, previously defiant, softened with a profound sadness. "Because it can't mean anything, Sandra," she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a raw desperation. "My life, my career, everything is expected. I'm not. I've never been." She trailed off, struggling for words, her hand trembling slightly as she raked it through her hair. "I don't know what it was. I don't know what we are." I took a step closer, my heart aching for the turmoil I saw in her eyes. "Maybe it's something new," I suggested, my voice softer now, understanding. "Something you didn't expect. Something that challenges what you thought you knew." She looked at me, truly looked at me, and in her amber eyes, I saw the raw confusion, the fear, but also, unmistakably, the undeniable pull she felt. The struggle was etched on her beautiful face, a war between expectation and an unforeseen, powerful desire. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, her hand reached out. It didn't grab, didn't pull, but simply rested, gently, on my arm, mirroring her gesture from the night before, yet somehow infinitely more significant. Her thumb began to trace the familiar, slow circles on my skin, a silent confession. I don't know what to do," she breathed, her gaze dropping to our intertwined hands. "But I felt it too, Sandra. God, I felt it." It was an admission of surrender, and in that moment, the tension that had choked us began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile, exhilarating hope. I lifted my free hand, gently cupping her jaw, tilting her head until her eyes met mine again. This time, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty in her gaze, only a profound, searching need. And then, she leaned in slowly, deliberately. This kiss was different. It wasn't impulsive, fueled by the adrenaline of a shared confession. It was a promise, unspoken but deeply felt, that we would navigate this uncharted territory together. Her lips, soft and hesitant, at first, deepened against mine, a reciprocal yearning that erased all doubt. It was the beginning of an answer, a new trajectory, a powerful force bending both our worlds into an unforeseen, undeniable connection. The championship race was a blur of speed and precision. With the unspoken truth now hanging between us, a new dynamic had settled. The kiss had been a catalyst, a moment that shattered old molds and forced a new reality into being. Cynthia, though still grappling with her internal conflict, drove with a renewed focus, a quiet fire in her eyes. And I, every meticulous adjustment, every precise calculation, poured into the car, a silent testament to my unwavering belief in her.
She won.
Not just by a hair, but decisively. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a cascade of triumph. The pit exploded with cheers and celebratory chaos. As she emerged from the car, helmet off, her face streaked with sweat and grime but radiant with victory, her eyes found mine across the frenzied scene. A smile, brilliant and unfiltered, spread across her face, and for a fleeting second, it felt as though the entire stadium faded away, leaving only us. Later, away from the flashing cameras and the clamor of the team celebration, we found ourselves in the quiet solitude of her hotel room. The adrenaline of the race still hummed in the air, but beneath it, a different kind of energy pulsed, electric and intimate. Cynthia, having showered and changed, stood by the window, looking out at the glittering city lights, a glass of champagne in her hand. Her red hair, freshly washed, cascaded over her shoulders, catching the ambient light. She was beautiful, breathtaking, and suddenly, so achingly vulnerable. "I still can't believe it," she murmured, her voice soft, almost awed.
"We did it, Sandra.
"We did it." She turned, her amber eyes meeting mine. There was no longer any deflection, no guardedness. Only a profound, open vulnerability. "And I couldn't have done it without you. Not just the car, but everything." I walked towards her, the words she couldn't quite say hanging in the air. The unspoken depth of her gratitude, the raw admission of her fear, and the undeniable reality of what had blossomed between us. I reached out, gently taking the champagne glass from her hand and setting it on a nearby table. Then, my hands found her waist, pulling her softly towards me. Her breath hitched. Her eyes, wide and searching, locked onto mine. There was a moment of hesitation, a fleeting flicker of uncertainty. Then she leaned into my touch, her hands coming up to rest on my chest, her fingers lightly gripping my shirt. "I still don't understand it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. This feeling. It's terrifying. And exhilarating." "It's okay not to understand everything, Cynthia," I replied, my voice low and reassuring. "Sometimes, you just feel it, and you trust it." My thumb stroked the soft fabric of her shirt. Her gaze dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes, a silent question. This time, there was no preamble, no fumbling. The kiss was deep, passionate, a revelation. It tasted of champagne and victory, of fear conquered and new beginnings. Her lips, soft and yielding, responded with an urgency that mirrored my own. Her hands slid up, wrapping around my neck, pulling me closer still, until there was no space left between us. The world outside the window, the roaring crowds, the demands of her career, all faded into irrelevance. There was only the warmth of her body against mine, the electric current that coursed through us, and the undeniable truth that we had found something profound and unexpected in each other. We moved together, a slow, deliberate dance into the uncharted territory of our desires. It wasn't about labels or expectations. It was about connection, about raw, honest feeling, about two souls finding solace and exhilaration in the most unforeseen of places. The morning light, soft and tentative, filtered through the curtains, painting the room in hues of rose and gold. Cynthia lay beside me, her head nestled in the crook of my arm, her vibrant red hair fanned out against the pillow. Her eyes were closed, a serene expression on her face that I hadn't often seen. The star driver, so often guarded and tense, was utterly at peace. I watched her, a quiet contentment settling over me. My usual cynicism had all but evaporated, replaced by a warmth that spread through my chest, an unfamiliar but deeply cherished sensation. She stirred, her eyelids fluttering open, her amber eyes soft and sleepy as they met mine. A slow smile, gentle and utterly genuine, bloomed on her face. "Good morning, mechanic," she murmured, her voice still husky with sleep. "Good morning, champion," I replied, my own smile mirroring hers. I gently ran my fingers through her soft hair, the the touch a silent promise. Our journey was just beginning. The racing world, with its relentless pace and constant scrutiny, would still be there. But now we had each other. A quiet strength had been forged in the crucible of unexpected connection. Cynthia, in her newfound vulnerability, found a profound healing, shedding the weight of past pressures under the unwavering gaze of my acceptance. And I, the pragmatic, detached mechanic, had discovered a depth of emotion I never knew I possessed, finding joy in her vibrant energy and the exhilarating uncertainty of our shared future. Hand in hand, metaphorically and literally, we stepped into the light of a new day, ready to navigate whatever curves lay ahead, together. The roar of the engines, the cheers of the crowd, they were just background noise now. Our story, our quiet, powerful love, was the only sound that truly mattered.